My name is Olivia. I am 31 years old, and the moment I stepped into the dressing room, I went numb. My sister, Giselle, was twirling in front of the mirror, wearing the gown I had chosen to walk down the aisle in with my future husband. I entered, my voice straining to stay calm. "What are you doing?" Giselle only smiled. "I look so much better in this than you." My mother chimed in. "White flatters Giselle's skin more than yours." My heart turned cold. But when I saw her wearing the pearl necklace, my grandmother Louise had left me with the words, "Only you deserve to wear this on your wedding day." I knew I could no longer ignore it like before. I had to act. Before I tell you my entire plan, tell me, where are you watching this video from? And if you've ever been forced to share the most sacred thing simply because it was family, hit like, subscribe, and leave a comment. I have. Because the story you're about to hear will make you look again at your own boundaries and ask yourself, have you held them tightly enough? I am a lawyer specializing in property disputes in Manhattan, and if there is one thing I have always held firm, it is boundaries, not only in legal contracts, but within my own family. Yet every boundary has someone eager to blur it, and for me, that person was Giselle, my younger sister, 27, who once studied fashion but dropped out, was infamous among her friends as the party princess, flaunting her glamorous outfits, Instagram filled with cocktails, tight dresses, and captions about life lessons. My parents, Janet, a retired teacher, and Robert, a former engineer, always defended her. To them, Giselle was the one who needed to be understood and loved, while I was the one who should be a little more flexible. All my life, I had never asked for anything from them. I put myself through college on scholarships, paid my own rent, and when I entered the legal profession, I bought my first pair of Louboutins with the bonus from my first case. But Giselle, she once borrowed those very shoes, wore them to a Soho club, and returned them with the heel broken. I said nothing. Then came the vintage handbag left by a client at the office. Giselle took it to a party, spilled wine on it, and cost me a $180,000 contract. Again, I said nothing. But on the day I got engaged to Daniel, the surgeon I loved deeply, I made myself a promise. The wedding would be mine, without compromise. We chose to host a brunch at the Brooklyn Botanic Garden, when peonies would be in full bloom, with a limited guest list, no drama, no spectacle. I commissioned a wedding dress from Claire Pettibone, a V-neck ivory satin gown with French lace, an elegant, simple design I had always dreamed of. I placed it, along with the pearl necklace my grandmother Louise had left me, in the closet at my parents' home in Long Island. And then, one Sunday afternoon, when I came to try it on, I froze at the doorway of the fitting room. Giselle was twirling before the mirror, the dress clinging to her body as if it had been made for her. In her hand was a bag of Doritos, neon orange cheese dust smudging her fingers, and around her neck gleamed my pearl necklace. I stepped inside, forcing my voice to remain calm. "What are you doing?" Giselle only smiled, as if it were self-evident. "I look so much better in this than you. This dress shouldn't be wasted on some outdated brunch." My mother sat nearby, sipping a cold brew, nodding. White really does flatter Giselle's complexion more. My heart turned cold. I remembered every small wound across the years, from dinners where my mother always served Giselle an extra portion, to the days when I was sick but still had to clean up because she was stressed after a breakup. I looked at my sister one more time. "If you don't take that off right now," I said, my voice like steel, "there will be no wedding at all." Giselle stood frozen for a few seconds, then peeled off the dress reluctantly, her eyes burning with fury at the insult. I walked out of that room, and I knew. Real boundaries must be built with action, not hope. I did not return to my parents' house for nearly 2 weeks after the wedding dress incident, but my mother could never stay silent for long. One Thursday morning, while I was reviewing a property dispute case file in Westchester, she called my office in unusually cheerful tones. "Olivia, your father and I went ahead and handled the wedding planner for you. I just signed his the upgraded package yesterday. They were so sweet." I froze mid-typing. What contract? She remained light, as though discussing fresh flowers. The 2-in-1 celebration package, darling. Very sensible. We added Giselle as a co-bride. It's a new trend from France, sisters marrying together. I already sent you the scanned copy by email, check it. I opened my inbox, nearly spilling hot tea onto my desk. Attached was a PDF titled, Wedding Package Upgrade, The Collins Sisters. Under brides it read, Olivia Collins and Giselle Collins. I scrolled down. The planner, someone my mother had once recommended from her yoga group, had agreed to arrange 2 bridal bouquets, 2 honor rows of seats, 2 announcement moments. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because of the bitter familiarity. Absurdity wrapped neatly in the excuse of family love. That evening, I returned to my Manhattan apartment, reopening my mother's email to the planner. In it, she had written, We want the spotlight shared equally between both girls. Giselle has been through heartbreak after her breakup, and Olivia can be a little dry, so sharing the stage will be healthier, a little. I'd lived my entire life inside that little, a little too stubborn, a little overlooked, always because someone else needed to shine. I sent a terse message to the planner. Please cancel all changes. The original contract stands. If there is any name added other than mine and Daniel's, this will be treated as a breach of contract. 30 minutes later, the planner called back, hesitant. I was only following instructions from your mother. I thought she had authority. My laugh was sharp. I am the one paying, and the only one who signed. Hanging up, I stood before my apartment window, watching the city sink into dusk. I had thought everything ended when Giselle took off that dress. But no, my mother did not need to scream. She did not need to argue. All she required was a sheet of paper, a forged signature, and a sugar-coated phrase like European trend. And just like that, my wedding day was being divided piece by piece. It began on Monday morning, while I was preparing case files for a property division hearing in Brooklyn. Sophia, my best friend, sent me a link with the message, You need to see this, now. It was a new podcast on Spotify titled 2 Brides, 1 Day. Why My Sister Won't Share Her Wedding. The voice that rang in my ear was unmistakable. Giselle's. She opened with a theatrical sigh, then said, I know my sister will hate me for this, but some truths must be spoken. I've always been the one who yielded. I just wanted to wear a white dress, to walk beside my family. But she said I was ruining her wedding. She even told me, no one wears white except me. I sat frozen in my office as the midtown skyscraper lights blinked on like a checkerboard outside my window. Her voice broke, now sobbing. I don't think my sister truly loves me. She loves control more. The podcast ended with melancholic background music and the line, Share this if you've ever been robbed of happiness by someone else's obsession. I didn't know where Giselle learned such tricks. Perhaps TikTok, perhaps from her ex-boyfriend, who worked in content creation. But I knew one thing. She was skilled at twisting stories, and the world always prefers tales where there's a sweet victim and a cold villain. In under 48 hours, the podcast spread like wildfire, especially on TikTok. People edited my voice from an old legal interview with Giselle's crying clip, framing me as the cold-blooded sister silencing her sibling over a dress. Strangers flooded my Instagram inbox with messages calling me a narcissist in a suit. Tabloids like the New York Post and Daily Mail splashed headlines, Lawyer bride versus broken sister. The battle begins. Relatives called, leaving voicemails. Olivia, how could you be so selfish? Can't you let your sister have a corner of the stage? But the worst was my mother's text. Only 4 lines. Giselle isn't well. You know she's depressed after her breakup. She deserves recognition, even just once. Can't you give her that one day? I stared at that message for a long time. Just once? I saw myself at 16, winning a full scholarship to NYU, yet that dinner, the whole family celebrated Giselle for landing a background role in a high school play, or the time I won my first legal case, but my parents sent flowers to the wrong office. I was never the center. I never asked to be. But this time, I had chosen, and they were doing everything to make me feel that choice was wrong. I shut off my phone, closed my office door, leaned back in my chair, staring at the city lights outside. Only one question echoed in my mind. How much more will they take if I don't stop them now? I thought the texts from my mother, the calls from relatives, the messages from strangers online were enough for 1 week. But by Wednesday evening, as I stepped out of a client meeting in Flatiron, another email appeared, this time from the bank account linked to the planner. The subject line read only 4 words: Funding Cancellation Notice. I frowned, opened it. The system confirmed. The $24,000 transfer from Janet and Robert Collins has been withdrawn at sender's request, which meant my parents had pulled back all wedding funds, the very sum they once pledged as their gift of blessing. I sank onto the steps of a bagel shop on the corner, still in my ash-gray suit with the lapel pin undone, feeling utterly hollow. They didn't need to say anything further. The act itself was enough. If you won't yield, then you'll pay the price yourself. I called my mother. I asked only one question. Why cancel the transfer? She answered swiftly, softly, without the slightest hesitation. Your father and I reconsidered. If you can't open your heart, then this wedding has no meaning. I just think Giselle deserves one day to feel loved. My grip on the phone tightened. And what about me? I asked. I've never had a day like that. Silence. Then she hung up. That night, I went to my grandmother Louise's house. She was in the white-tiled kitchen, baking peach cobbler. When I recounted everything, the podcast, the pulled money, my father's silence, she nodded slowly, as if she had long expected it. Do you remember Aunt Louise? She asked. She nearly married in 1993. A fall wedding in Vermont, invitations printed, dress fitted. But your mother, still headstrong then, announced her engagement the very same day. Threw the whole family into chaos. Your aunt's wedding was canceled within a week. I sat frozen, chills crawling up my spine. And you stayed silent all these years? I asked. Because everyone thought silence preserved family, she replied. But in truth, it only preserves the manipulator's throne. She handed me a pale yellow envelope, slightly worn, sealed with paper tape. My latest will. Olivia, you are the primary heir. The Vermont house, the hillside land, and ownership of your great-grandfather's pottery studio. Signed, notarized. I stared in shock. Does Giselle know? Not yet, and I don't think it's time. I could not speak. I sat still, staring at my hands on the chipped wooden table. This story had begun long before I was even born. I was merely the next woman told to sacrifice for family. But this time, there would be no more sacrifice. At least, not from me. I began to calculate, no longer with emotion, but with the instincts of a dispute lawyer. Who held the advantage? Who was playing dirty? And what percentage of my assets still needed protection? And assets here were not only money, but dignity, effort, and the wedding day I had dreamed of, as an anchor after all the years I had lived in silence. The next morning, Daniel placed a hot cup of coffee on my desk, then sat across from me, saying, I went over the cost breakdown. We can cover it all ourselves. I stared at him, hardly believing, as he showed me a spreadsheet. The venue, brunch catering, flowers, acoustic band, the dress, and photography services, nearly $47,000 in total. I nodded, telling him I was ready to cover half if it meant doing it our way. But he squeezed my hand and replied, No, I'll cover most of it. You hold the calm of a lawyer. I'll hold the calm of the heart. I didn't cry, but something inside me cracked, a gratitude words could not capture. That afternoon, I called Sophia, my best friend since college, now freelancing as a designer, with experience working alongside New York wedding planners, and I sent her the entire email chain my mother had sent to the old planner, even the audio notes where she said, if Olivia refuses, just have Giselle show up as a surprise second bride. Plan in parallel. Sophia opened Google Drive, naming a folder Incident Giselle Wedding, timestamping every file with sender and content documented. When she asked what I planned to do with it, I paused before answering, I don't know, but if I need to prove who is controlling whom, this is evidence. She nodded, promising to create signed PDFs so they couldn't be altered. That night, while preparing case files for a property dispute, I received a text from David, a senior associate at my firm, warning, you should keep your private life clean, Olivia. Clients read tabloids more than you think, and they fear drama. I closed my laptop, giving no reply, but his words clung to me all night. They fear drama. No one said, they fear manipulation, or, they fear you losing control. Only drama. And if I stayed silent just to keep appearances of peace, was I any different from the generations of women forced into the wings? No, not this time. I would not disappear. I would step onto the stage, and for the first time, I would speak the truth. I did not discover it through some grand revelation, but through the smallest detail, an automated bank notification showing the wedding fund account Daniel and I had set up 6 months earlier with two-factor authentication had been charged $7,200 for a catering service we had never booked. The transaction read, Golden Doves Catering, upfront booking. A name I had never heard until I searched online and froze. Golden Dove specialized in cocktail parties with an all-white dress code, the very same company Giselle had promoted in her podcast 2 weeks earlier. I called the bank immediately, requesting a full statement, and the truth appeared clear as daylight. The order was sent from my secondary email, one I only used for Pinterest and trivial websites, but the digital signature carried my name, though it was not the one I used for any official document. I had seen this type of forgery before, in civil cases where one party faked signatures to seize assets, and now I was the victim. I called Sophia, keeping my tone even. I need a signature comparison. I already have my authentic sample. Check the metadata of the payment file. 30 minutes later, she sent me a screenshot confirming it came from Giselle's MacBook, registered under username GC. I closed my eyes, leaning back into my chair with no doubt left. This was no longer about emotions or sibling drama, but deliberate financial fraud. I compiled all the files, labeling them Collins vs. Collins, internal asset fraud, draft, stored them in my encrypted drive, and the next morning, I went to a notary office in Lower Manhattan, where an employee I trusted had worked with me on a major inheritance case. We are not filing yet, I told her. I just want this file notarized, sealed, and stored independently. If anything happens, this will be evidence. She stamped each page without a word, and when I stepped outside, light rain had begun to fall. I stood beneath the awning of an antique shop, watching the hurried crowd pass, and inside me was not rage, but a sharp, cold clarity. Giselle thought she could forge my signature. My mother thought she could script this story to the final scene. But they both forgot that I am not only a bride, I am a lawyer. And this time I would not yield. Not for blood, not for reputation, but for the truth. I never imagined I would one day see my sister's face, mascara smeared, lips trembling, blouse deliberately loose, appear on Good Morning America. But it happened on Monday morning, as I was at the office reviewing public land bid files when Sophia rushed in, phone in hand, her face pale as if she had just seen a car crash. Turn on Channel 7, she said, and the screen lit up with Giselle sitting opposite the famous host, framed in warm golden lights, with a chamomile teacup in hand, her voice breaking at each carefully chosen phrase. My sister? She's always been the better one, the right one. I was only the little sister wanting a moment to feel important. But she wanted to erase me from the wedding, as if I were a stain. The host nodded. And your podcast? That was your way of reclaiming your voice? Giselle looked straight into the camera, saying, Yes, I wasn't trying to steal the spotlight. I only wanted to walk beside my sister, just once. I did not know how long I stood frozen before Sophia turned off the TV, leaving silence heavy in the room, and 45 minutes later, on Twitter, X, a new hashtag shot to the top 3 trending in New York. Todd's Sisters in White. A clipped video of the segment spread across TikTok with a vintage orange filter captioned Justice for Giselle, while hundreds of strangers commented, "She's a lawyer. That doesn't give her the right to control someone else's happiness. Family means sharing, not monopolizing a wedding. And Olivia needs to chill. It's just a dress." I wanted to scream that it was never just a dress, but social media never leaves room for explanations. Then my office phone rang. It was my boss, Howard, blunt and stripped of courtesy. "I don't care who's right or wrong. Client read the news. If you can't keep your private life clean, consider taking leave before someone requests it." I sat still, staring at my hands on the desk. Hands that had drafted hundreds of contracts and defended countless clients, now trembling faintly. I didn't cry, but I felt as if I stood inside a room of mirrors, each reflecting a distorted version of me. Olivia the cold sister, Olivia the rigid lawyer, Olivia the control freak. None were true, but no one cared about the truth. They only wanted a story to share. I opened my laptop, pulled up Sophia's folder, Incident Giselle Wedding, reread the emails, the transaction records, the audio files, and drew a deep breath. If they wanted a story, this time I would be the one to tell it, and I would not begin with tears but with the truth. I returned to Vermont that weekend, not to hide but to confront, and Grandmother Louise awaited me in the old wooden house on the hill, unchanged since childhood. The stone fireplace, the bookshelf smelling of paper, the olive green porcelain tea set I had used when playing pretend adult at age 7. She did not ask why I came, only said, "There's fresh apple pie by the stove, and the study is still yours." That night, as rain tapped softly on the roof, I sat in the armchair by the fire while she folded towels, until she set a small wooden box on the table. "Do you know your mother once ruined Aunt Louise's wedding?" she asked. And when I froze, she explained that my aunt had been engaged to a man in film, not approved by the family, and my mother announced her own engagement on the same day, even hosting a family dinner first, which left Aunt Louise panicked, betrayed, and ultimately canceling her wedding. Inside the box lay invitations never sent, a scrap of lace from a dress never worn, and letters of consolation from friends, one saying, "Louise, don't be sad, you still deserve love." I held a yellowed note where my aunt had written, "I stayed silent because I thought keeping family mattered more than keeping my day." Grandmother poured tea, her voice lowering. "Your mother didn't do it out of cruelty. She did it because she believed if she controlled the spotlight, she'd never be forgotten." I looked at her and said, "And if I don't resist, it will go on." She nodded, then pulled a file from the drawer. "This is my will, updated in 2020. This Vermont house, the back lot, and the pottery studio, all belong to you. No parental signature needed, already notarized, already recorded." I froze, asking, "Does Giselle know?" She shook her head, answering, "Not yet. Because you must know first, to understand you are not the afterthought, not the one meant to share for fairness. You are the first I chose." I held the file tightly without opening it, feeling not anger but a strange calm. For the first time in my life, I felt trusted unconditionally. When I left the next morning, she said only, "If they force you into silence to be called good, remember, good never means being devoured." I drove away, watching the little wooden house shrink in the rearview mirror against the red maples, and I knew it was time to carry both the past and the truth back to New York. Not to salvage anyone, but to reclaim everything they had tried to make me forget. I returned to Manhattan on Monday afternoon under light showers, the streaks of rain on the taxi window like faint underlines in a contract full of redactions. On the way back, I opened my phone. The first email was from the old planner, the one who had once taken instructions from my mother, offering apologies and suggesting a family mediation session. I deleted it and called the Wedding Artists Co., a team known for private weddings for writers, artists, and clients who demanded discretion. I was brief. I need a planner with no ties to my family, signing an NDA from the start, and absolute confidentiality with the guest list. They agreed, and we met at a small cafe in West Village, where I signed a new contract with 3 words: Olivia M. Collins. No Giselle, no Janet, no shared spotlight. I transferred my dress, the ivory satin V-neck from Claire Pettibone, and the pearl necklace from Grandmother Louise to Vermont, packing them with silk gloves, acid-free paper, and sealing them in a locked wooden chest with tamper-proof tape. Sophia came with me, photographing the process, storing metadata for each step. "You're guarding it like criminal evidence," she laughed, and I answered quietly, "If they dared to forge my signature, they would dare to destroy this." We sealed the chest inside Grandmother Louise's camera-guarded cabinet. Olivia, the weak, yielding version, stayed there. Back in the city, I began rewriting my wedding speech. Not the sweet platitudes people expect, but words I had never spoken aloud in 31 years. I typed the first line into Google Docs. I used to think that to keep a family, I had to share, even if it meant having nothing of my own. But today, I choose to keep this day. Because this is not just a ceremony. This is a boundary. I wrote in silence as though reconstructing a building after fire. Not smoke, not ash, only a new structure, clean, untouched by anyone who hadn't knocked first. The next day, I sent out a new RSVP. The guest list was reduced to 90. Family, only 3, Louise, Daniel, and me. Giselle was not invited. Neither were my parents. The new planner sent me a seating chart, with the remark, "Minimalist but powerful," like a manifesto. That night, sitting alone in my apartment, I turned off the lights. For the first time in my life, I did not feel like I was defending. I felt like I was building, not for revenge, but to stand tall. And when the sated tried to force their way in again, I would not need to scream, I would not need to weep. I would only need to open a document and point to the rightful signature. The evening before the wedding, New York drizzled fine and cold. I was in a meeting room with my new planner, finalizing seating arrangements, sampling the lavender lemon cake, and checking the acoustic duo when a call came through from Brooklyn Botanic Garden Security. The man's voice was gravelly but polite. "Ms. Collins, we have a group here arriving ahead of schedule with items apparently for the wedding. We've stopped them at the main gate, as per your approved list." I asked, "Who are they?" He answered slowly. "A woman named Janet Collins, a man named Robert Collins, and a young woman, Giselle." I drew in a long breath. "What are they carrying?" "A U-Haul. Inside, a white dress, boxes of baby's breath, a collapsible tent, crates of mini champagne, and a sign reading, 'The Collins Sisters. Double the love.'" I closed my eyes. No racing heart, no trembling hands. Only the familiar sensation of them replaying the same script, believing I would be the daughter who would let it go, to avoid making a scene. I rose, put on my beige trench coat, tied my hair back. On the way to Brooklyn, I called the planner. "No one not on the RSVP enters the prep area, especially any other Collins besides me." She confirmed, "Private security has the hard list. No one gets in." When I arrived and the sun had just set behind the azaleas, golden light glazing the glass roof. And there they were, 3 figures by the U-Haul, Giselle in a simple white cocktail dress, hair curled, makeup set as if waiting for the music to start. My father staring at the ground. My mother, the only one meeting my eyes, unflinching. I stopped 3 meters away. "What are you doing here?" Giselle spoke first, breathless. "I just want to stand next to you, just for a minute. I've prepared everything." I looked at her, at the eyes that once filled with tears on a podcast, but now brimmed with calculation. "This is not a stage," I said, "and I am no longer a supporting role in this family play." My mother interjected, "You can't shut the whole family out. People will say you're cruel." I smiled faintly. If protecting my own wedding makes me cruel, then I welcome the name. I turned to the guards. "Escort them out." History doesn't need to repeat itself here. Giselle broke into sobs. Not real grief, but the kind staged for effect. Yet this time there were no cameras, no hosts, no defenders. Only me, the only rightful presence here. As I walked back inside, the planner met me with the final seating chart. "Everything's secure," she said. I nodded, placing my hand on the speech I would deliver tomorrow. And for the first time, I did not fear being hated, misunderstood, or called selfish. I only saw one truth. Tomorrow would be my day. And they would remain outside the gate. The morning dawned clearer than any May morning I could remember. Sunlight filtered through the canopy of Brooklyn Botanic Garden, casting patterns across the white-painted rows of chairs like polished piano keys. Everything was peaceful. Strangely so. No shouting, no chaos, only the soft notes of a violin-guitar duet by the lotus pond. I wore the satin V-neck gown, fitted yet gentle, not ostentatious, exactly as I had dreamed. Louise's pearls cooled against my collarbone, fitting so perfectly they felt like memory itself. As I stepped from the preparation room, the planner handed me a discreet earpiece. "There's been an attempt," she whispered. I waited. A man, Robert Collins, tried to hand the MC a script that read, "Today we celebrate two brides of the Collins family, Olivia and Giselle. Two sisters, one love." My breath slowed. And the MC? "Refused. Your contract lists one bride. She will read it exactly." I nodded. "Thank you for keeping your word." Then I walked out. My ivory shoes touched each stone step as River Flows in You began. And at the end of the aisle there was no father, no one to give me away. Only Louise, her silver hair tied neatly, a pale blue silk scarf over her shoulders, placing her hand lightly on my arm, an anchor both quiet and unbreakable. Guests rose. I walked among them, and the eyes upon me held no pity, no doubt, only quiet respect. Daniel stood waiting at the altar, his gaze filled with something unnameable, only that in this world he was the one person who had never asked me to share what I did not wish to. Mid-ceremony, the MC lifted the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, today we gather to witness the wedding of Olivia M. Collins and Daniel R. Grant. One bride, one groom, no more, no less." A brief silence, then applause, not forced, not for show, but as if something right had been affirmed. I took the microphone, voice steady. "I once believed I had to choose, either a peaceful wedding or my family. But today I know, no one has the right to make me choose between love and self-respect. This is not just a wedding, this is a boundary. And from this day forward, I will be the one to set it." I returned the microphone. No long speeches, no accusations, no names. But I knew. They understood. Sitting at the back row for the first time, unable to push forward. When Daniel and I exchanged rings, a breeze swept through the garden, and a peony petal landed on my neckline, a reminder from the past that this moment was mine, and I had kept it whole, by my own hand. What I felt most clearly after the wedding was not joy nor exhaustion. It was stillness. No drama. No surprises. No one barging in, no staged tears, no relatives sneaking handwritten notes to the stage at the last minute. Everything unfolded exactly as I had arranged. Each minute, each seat, each note of music, and for the first time in my life, everything was mine. I entered the reception in my Claire Pettibone gown, glimmering under warm amber lights, Louise's pearls resting at my neck like an indelible seal. I did not need to name her or honor her aloud. She sat at the front table, raising a glass of sparkling rosé, nodding once when our eyes met. We understood without words. I had held the boundary. Giselle was absent. My mother Janet was absent. And my father, I heard he left quietly after the ceremony, saying nothing. I had not expelled them. I had simply not opened the door to a space they once tried to claim. When it came time for speeches, I stepped onto the small stage without paper, speaking as plainly as I would before a jury. I know many of you are here not only for love, but out of curiosity, because the story traveled farther than I ever imagined. But if you are here, it means you chose to trust me. To trust that a woman can hold on to her own day without asking anyone's permission. For that, I thank you. Not for your support, but for letting me be myself. There was no thunderous applause, only a few wet eyes, a few nods, and no one daring to seize the microphone. The reception carried on with soft jazz. The cake cut without spectacle. No live streams, no TikToks stitched for likes. Guests mingled, ate, spoke, photographed under the fading light of the garden. A wedding in truth, not entertainment. Daniel and I danced our first dance to a slow jazz rendition of La Vie en Rose, because I had told him, I've lived too long in someone else's shadow. From now on, everything I see must have its own color. And he only smiled, holding me close. Then, let's start with Rose. And in that moment, I knew I had not only married the man I loved, I had married a new version of myself, one who no longer needed recognition to hold worth, one who had reclaimed her name. On the microphone, on the guest list, on every legal document, and most importantly, in the life I chose to live. Just 2 days after the wedding, I returned to the Midtown law office in a navy blazer with my hair tied neatly back. No honeymoon. I didn't need one. Not because I didn't want rest, but because I knew the story wasn't over. Not for me, but for the rest of the world. News began to break from guests who posted photos. The Brooklyn Garden glowing in sunlight. A speech that named no one yet held the entire crowd still. And the moment I walked down the aisle not with my father, but with my grandmother. One photo was chosen and spread everywhere. Me, alone, microphone in hand. The sun behind me. Captioned, "One bride, one voice, one boundary." The hashtag #OneBride only first appeared from a small feminist blogger in Oregon, but within 24 hours it rose to the #2 trend on Twitter, X. People began to say, women are not born to share the spotlight with anyone, not even sisters. The New York Post ran a piece headlined, "Lawyer Olivia Collins, From Wedding Dress Scandal to Icon of Boundaries." Giselle's podcast, Two Brides, One Day, was quickly re-examined. Her dramatic accusations were compared with the reality of the wedding, and this time, the story didn't align. Media experts began calling the podcast a manipulative narrative, a textbook case of gaslighting an older sister under victim culture. The online community no longer split sides. They leaned entirely toward the one who had stayed silent, and then spoken with truth. Giselle lost an advertising contract with a small jewelry brand that had sponsored her podcast. TikTok clips of "My Cruel Sister" were deleted en masse. Then, in a live stream, Giselle appeared. No makeup, voice forced to tremble, saying, "I didn't think it would go this far. I just wanted a moment." But this time, no one commented. "Her sister is terrifying." They said, "Enough. Grow up. Everyone has the right to their own path." Meanwhile, I received an email from my firm. My boss, Howard, wrote one line, "Handled cleanly. Clients like the quiet." I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my laptop and visited the homepage of the small law practice I had quietly built over 6 months. Under the About section, I added a single line. "Helping women keep what is theirs, with the language of law, not tears." The story had traveled far, but this time, I was not swept away. I stood at the center, compass in hand. Not to avoid the storm, but to chart the way forward. 6 months after the wedding, I left Manhattan. Not because I hated the city. I had once loved the car horns, the lights that never dimmed, and the feeling of entering a courtroom with a cold brew in hand, hair pulled back, case file under my arm, like a weapon. But now I wanted something else. Silence with depth. Space that was real. And boundaries that could be seen with the eyes. Daniel and I chose a small house on the outskirts of Connecticut, at the edge of a forest, 12 minutes drive from the Metro North Station. 1 floor and a loft, white walls, gray roof, a porch just wide enough for a reading bench, and a lavender pot. Each morning, I brewed coffee by hand. No machine. Daniel worked at the nearby hospital, and for the first time in 8 years, I did not open firm emails at 6 a.m. Louise moved nearby, only a short walk away. The Vermont property still belonged to me, but she said, "Keep it. When you need a place for silence without explanation, it will wait." In the afternoons, she often brought peach cobbler, sitting on the porch reading the paper. None of us mentioned Janet or Giselle. Not out of resentment, but because some people no longer needed to appear for the story to continue. I opened my own practice. Small, quiet, mostly on Zoom, meeting clients at a local cafe. My specialty: legal counsel for women financially manipulated by family. I met single mothers whose sisters stole inheritances, daughters who discovered parents forged signatures to borrow loans, women in their 40s asking for the first time, "Do I have the right to say no?" Even to my mother? Each session, I began with one question. "Have you ever been called selfish just because you wanted to keep what was yours?" They usually nodded, and I would smile, softly. "Then you've come to the right place." Last week, a Connecticut state legislator, whom I had never met, spoke at a women's autonomy conference. In her speech, she quoted a line I had said at my wedding. "No one can split a bride in two, just as no one can split your identity, simply because they share your last name." My office that day was empty, but for me, afternoon light through dusty glass, my laptop on silent, and I laughed out loud, not from pride, but because, finally, my story was no longer about a wedding dress. It had become something larger, a living example that you can begin again, at any age, as long as you are willing to yield not one more inch. I no longer kept my father's number in my phone, not out of hatred, but because I had no need of it. The only call from him after the wedding was a missed one. No voicemail, no message. I didn't return it, and he never called again. Perhaps in his mind, I was too far gone to begin again. Perhaps he still waited for me to bend first. But one late autumn Friday, as I returned from my office and collected mail from the box, a silver-gray SUV stopped at the gate. The door opened. He stepped out. Robert Collins, the man who had held my hand down hospital corridors when I was 10. The man who silently watched me sign the contract for my first home, with no blessing, no praise. And the man who stood behind Giselle as she tried to crash my wedding. I stood holding a fistful of supermarket flyers. "I just want to talk," he said, voice smaller than I remembered. "No mother, just me." I didn't invite him inside, but I nodded, opened the wooden gate, and gestured to the porch bench. We sat, distance enough not to touch shoulders, but not so far we had to raise our voices. He didn't look at me, only pulled from his pocket an old birthday card, yellowed and folded. I recognized it instantly. My 8th birthday. Mother hadn't bought a cake because Giselle had a cold, but he had. He hid the card in his desk drawer. I never knew he kept it. "I'm not good at words," he began. "I wasn't the ideal father, but I saw everything, the times you stepped back, the times you endured. And when you said no, I chose no side at all. And that was wrong." I stayed silent. He looked at me, really looked, for the first time. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm sorry. For letting you believe you had to be strong alone." My fingers traced the card's worn edge. He breathed deeply. "I want my daughter back. If you'll have me." I turned, the last light of day casting a pale gold across his cheek, revealing wrinkles I had never noticed. "I don't reject affection," I said steadily. "But if you want your daughter back, you must understand. From now on, no one crosses my boundaries again. Not even with silence." He nodded. No excuses, no defense, just a nod. And for the first time in years, I rested my head lightly on his shoulder, not as a child returning to her father's arms, but as a woman allowing herself to keep the best of memory, without losing herself. If you have stayed with me until now, thank you. for walking through a journey not everyone dares to tell. And if you believe this story could help another woman, someone enduring in silence, please like and share this video. Because perhaps, with just one click, someone out there may realize she is not going through this alone. And if you want to hear more stories like this, stories of boundaries, awakening, and reclaiming one's voice, please subscribe. Because healing never follows just one path. And here, we walk together.